Red button is on, Seb.
All right. And we are ready to go.
Want me to do the clap?
Good.
Sure, you do the
That
typical...
clap is signature. We need that.
Yeah.
Gotta have a clap. Hey guys, Jeremy, National Fire Radio, here tonight in the studio with Rob and Tucker. This studio sessions for us, this podcast has really been rolling out, and we've been bringing on some fantastic guys in the fire service. And tonight is not short of that at all. Al Evangelista is a ex-chief of the Pompton Lakes Fire Department, a retired director of the Passaic County, New Jersey Fire Academy for 25 years. He's now the director of OEM for the town of Pompton Lakes. And his pedigree goes on. And not only that, but Al is and was the only principal ever to assign me a Saturday detention, and we'll get into that in a little while. As well as, I'll tell you, in my very young days in the fire service, Al was instrumental in a few things, how and where I went to because of his tutelage, and I thank you firsthand tonight for that.
Very welcome.
But I can't thank you enough for being here tonight, Al.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you. We're going to hop right into it. You know, we've talked about, we kind of prepped you a little bit as to what we do here and how informal it is, and we really want to capture the stories and the culture and tradition. But we always jump in with our guests right off the bat, and we go, do you remember your first fire? And so, do you, many years ago, or give us, do you remember maybe when you joined, some memorable something? Give me something.
I remember my first fire very vividly. It was a brush fire.
Yeah.
And I had been at the firehouse talking to the chief, and he gave me my plectron. This is prior to pagers. And I went home. We have a siren system in town, and he said, if the siren goes off, if the plectron goes off, you report to the firehouse. First day. Well, I go home, and a couple hours later, it goes off. So I respond in a bathing suit. And I jump on the back step of an engine going through a brush fire in a bathing suit.
Nice.
With a guy driving and another guy in the officer's seat. That was it. It was a daytime alarm, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So we got there, pulled the booster line, which I understand are coming back now. We got away from them for quite a few years, and now they're on the way back. And we proceeded to put the brush fire out. And mission accomplished, and we went home safely.
That's right.
So that was my first fire.
That's great. And how long was that quick into? I mean, you got your plectron that day?
I literally got the speech
Yep.
and the plectron and so forth that day.
So
Now you've got to understand, we weren't issued personal gear back then.
right.
Until, we were in for a couple of weeks.
And what year was this?
We
now?
had gear hanging on the apparatus, spare gear.
Right.
One size fit all. You put the boots on, you put the coat on, you put the helmet on. Even if you had to wear it sideways, it fit your head. And that's what I remember. And that's what I dealt with when I joined.
That's awesome. That's cool. I mean, talk about the hook, right? I mean, that has to be 18 years old?
I was older when I joined.
Oh, okay.
I didn't immediately want to join the fire
Gotcha.
department. Friends of mine, got me to join.
Okay.
And every Friday afternoon I come home from work, they'd be sitting in front of the firehouse waving, come on, come on, come on.
Yep.
The next thing you know, they're pushing the application, under my nose. And finally I said, the hell with it, let me join. My brother had already joined, and he was only in a couple months ahead of me. So I joined, and here I am.
That's awesome. What a career you've had.
Yes, 42 years.
Now, just to kind of tag on to the first fire, what was the first, what was your first real fire where you were just like, kind of like, hey, like this is it. Like this isn't just the training, this isn't, the talk. Like you knew you were going to work. And
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up because, unfortunately for the young men and women today that have joined, we had a lot of fires back then, as you can imagine. If they weren't structure fires, they were car fires. I mean, working car fires. We didn't have all the protections that we have today, the rollover, the gas shuts off, this, non-combustible textiles and things of that nature. You knew you were going to work each and every time you went out that door. My first house fire that I remember was on Ramapo Avenue. It was a second floor bedroom job. Back then we had a lot of bedrooms. A lot of bedroom jobs on Friday and Saturday night. People come home from the bar, they go upstairs, they were smoking, they fall asleep at the ashtray or with the cigarette rather in bed. And next thing you know, you had a bedroom fire with a possible victim.
Yeah, there's no smoke detectors at this time, so it's unless somebody sees it or smells it that it's getting called in.
And so we had our good share, of structure fires. So I can remember several. We had a fire in a 3-story apartment building. It was a working fire and then chases.
Yeah,
We weren't
okay.
familiar with chases. This fire went right up the chase to the top, and we caught it. You know, fortunately, the older guys that were in ahead of us, they learned, not so much in a fire academy, they learned by experience.
Right.
You know, they were grunts.
Right.
And a lot of guys were ex-military, so they had a little bit of training from that. And, you know, you put two and two together, and you work together as a team, and you can get a lot accomplished.
Yeah, what I was telling these guys was back in the day when I first joined, we only had like 35 fires in a year, but you knew
Right.
that almost
They were
every
all
single one of them
jobs.
was a real thing.
Yeah.
And now, you know, you go out on smoke detectors and CO calls and, you know, smell
Yeah.
of gas and,
Yeah.
you know, really ups
Yeah.
the calls.
Yeah, and unfortunately for the young people today, the repetitiveness of those calls is wearing them out, it's burning them out.
Right.
To the point where, and I think every chief I talk to that I see either at the academy or at meetings, they all have the same problem. People are not coming out, especially at night. These people have full-time jobs in the morning. How many times can you go back to the same building for the same issue or
Right.
the same problem, or steam from a shower, or you know whatever
And
the
it's
case may
that
be?
big time period between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. that the
Right.
volunteers
Very
aren't
tough.
coming out.
Very tough.
Well, and it's interesting because alarm technology is come
Earthquake.
along. Yeah.
Oh
A
yeah.
little shade there, but alarm technology has come from like so that in the beginning of my fire service career it was it's not a fire alarm until we get there, it's an alarm, and then we'll determine what sets
Right.
the alarm off and everything else. And now like we have colleges that are being or dormitories that are being built on the campuses that it's a smart alarm system. So if the alarm activates in the dormitory room, like
Right.
it goes into a local alarm and security checks it
Sure.
out. But if the smoke gets out into the hallway, it dumps the whole building. And it was really funny because we were having this, like, became an agitated discussion at work as to gearing up for calls. And I said, well, you know, you're telling me you don't want to put your gear on for this one, but yet for this one you are, and they're the same exact thing. So
Right.
because there's a security guard, you know, checking this one out, it's okay, but this one it's not. So it's just I find that funny with the alarm technology
Right.
kind of changing. It's really
Oh, it's changed it immensely. And you know, my first fire chief always said this: the greatest invention for the fire service was the fire smoke detector, smoke detector, because what they did to save lives, not so much structures, but what they did to save lives. I would love to know how many people were woken up in the middle of the night that had a small fire in their home
Right.
and put it out by themselves with a dishpan of water from the sink and never called it in.
Yeah.
You're right.
We don't know about all those calls.
yeah.
You know, it is. I have to agree with him. It was the best invention I think that ever came out, and it was '75 when they really began to be mass produced. So that was put a tremendous change on the fire service, without a doubt. But again, you knew when you were going out the door on a call,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know,
But that's
that you had work.
the same reason why we don't have that many large structure fires now, because
Right.
everybody's done repairs on their house, so they have to come up to date.
Sure.
You know, and everything's wired in, so nothing ever gets going by the time.
Right.
Like again, it used to be called in by the neighbors.
Right.
So
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I can't say fortunately for the young people in the service today, because it sounds terrible, but if people didn't do stupid things, we wouldn't even have the fires that we're having today.
Sure.
When you think about it, because most of the fires that we're having today circumvent protections that were built, or they're, you know, handling gasoline, or, you know, improper smoking materials, or fireworks, or whatever the case may be. We're still going to get it. As long as people are people, we're going to get alarms. You know, I tell them that in every fire academy class, but it's changed.
Yeah.
You know, the demographics have changed. Our response has changed. Again, do I gear up? Don't I gear up? You're listening for the cops. You know, if they report work of fire, obviously, you know. When I say we're getting multiple calls on it, you know, it's,
Yeah, you're going to work.
you know, everybody's going nuts. But it's changed immensely in my 42 years in the service.
Yeah, we've hit on so many things in this little nook here with so many different guests about how it's changed, and we always go from it could take anywhere. The conversation can go to technology, to response, to volunteerism, to the career staff, to innovation. I mean, the list goes on, and how fast things have changed. And now, you look at today, we're talking about cancer-causing agents versus, 10 years ago we talked about thermal imaging, to 20 years ago SCBA, to, so
Sure.
it's incredible in building, building construction and everything, right? Personal protective. So that whole discussion. But I like what you were hitting on before a little bit about the when you guys joined, Tucker, you as well, back in the 70s. I don't want to date you, but I would think mid to late 70s.
You're not as type, so it wouldn't work.
True. But,
So that was the disco era, when I really wasn't into that.
Disco Tucker? I can see that. I can see platforms.
It goes well, Disco
Yeah,
Tucker.
I agree. But I can see what you guys are getting at is call volume was much less frequent, but the
It was
quality of the work was there. And as this graph has changed and the lines cross, right, where call volume goes up and less activity, less fire activity goes down or less fire duty goes down, and then we talk about full-time jobs,
But-
second jobs,
right.
and so on. And go ahead.
Here's kind of a hidden aspect of what you just hit on.
Yeah.
It's like a football team. I always use that as an analogy. If we always show up for the game and never play the game, we're never going to be good.
Agreed.
And that's what's happened to us today as a fire service. Now, short of the career side, where they're working together every day, the same 4 people are working together every day. So regardless of what they do, they're still together, they're thinking together, I know what you're doing, you know what he's doing.
Right.
We don't have that in the volunteers, as you know. Every time we go out the door, it could
Sure.
be 4 different people. So we've lost that part of it too, where at least when we went out for the real deal, we worked together as a team. And you saw the more calls you had, the more polish you got.
Yeah, and
We don't
back
have
then,
that opportunity
We
anymore.
also didn't have the radios, and you would have guys that would
Exactly.
those guys would just put up the ladders, these guys would take the water in.
Right.
No communication.
They knew what to do.
It just kind of happened.
They knew what to
You'd
do.
look around and you'd notice that this job wasn't being done, and then you and another guy would just start taking care of it.
Right.
Exactly.
And we talk about the calls and not getting like that football team that doesn't get to play football, and it's really frustrating because there's, I always say like it's somewhere along the line the 4 of us that think of a really good idea to get experience to our membership through training, and then like this microphone gets wired into a satellite in outer space, it links up, Morse code goes out, and a safety battalion gets activated and says,
Yeah.
this is completely dangerous, we're not doing this. And I like we went from one extreme to another with that because, you look at how the Navy SEALs as an example will train, and they train right up, they go to 100%, and they back off like 2 or 3 and they come back down. That's where we need to be at, but we can't do that because we're so hampered sometimes by, and I'm not saying the safety stuff isn't necessary, but it's a little overkill to the point where
It
we
is.
can't, like,
But
can we have any acquired burns anymore?
And it's
I mean,
all a result, God forbid, of firefighter injuries and deaths.
Yeah.
Every time, it's like a traffic light. You have enough motor vehicle accidents at an intersection to put up the light, finally, after so many people died there, God forbid. And unfortunately, fire service is very much like that. Somebody
Reactive.
mentioned bailout bags.
Yeah.
Right,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
Bailout bags, we know why they came around as a result of. And, there's technology was invented, like thermal imaging camera is the best. As a matter of fact, our department, the first camera we had was the Carnes helmet, if you remember that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Got the
I
big
do.
camera right in
Yeah.
front. We actually had a Boy Scout troop that raised the money with us to buy Pompton Lakes their first imaging camera, and it was that Carnes fire helmet. Clifton had them because the company's in Clifton. I think they had 2. I went down there,
Called the
and I
Iris.
trained with one. They had a base, yes, the Iris.
Iris, right?
They had a basement set up in a firehouse, with all the different props and everything to use it. And I went down there and operated with it, and it was, for its time, it was an exceptional piece of equipment.
Sure.
It was just bulky, it was heavy. The same guy had to wear the same helmet.
Yeah.
Everybody had to wear the same helmet, and that was a drawback for it. As compared to today's handhelds and everything else, didn't show you color, but it was more sensitive, I will tell you that, than most of the things out on the
Well, I remember
market
that because
today.
that was
It was
at the-
cumbersome.
That was at the time, though, too, Rob. For your knowledge, you're out of New York. We're New Jersey guys. New Jersey, the state of New Jersey issued cameras to fire departments that got on board with online and computer data reporting.
Right.
So if you went to a digital format for doing your state reporting, they rewarded you with a camera.
It was a big incentive.
Yeah, it was a big
Wow,
incentive.
yeah, it's-
And so that was cool because I have to
But
think.
it was also a big camera.
Yeah, why? It was that
the
the
bullard.
red bullard with the
Yeah,
handle.
red-
and,
that's
One of the
what I
first
remember,
generations.
bullard.
right.
Yeah.
Well, we had one of those that was actually outfitted with a remote, so
Yes.
your Chiefs car
Yeah.
could watch
Yep.
everything they
Yeah.
were doing, and that worked out as being a really good tool for training because you could pop in a videotape and you could tape
Record.
them. Then when we come out, we can look at it and see where you guys went, and you had the camera, so you should have been.
It was a good
So
training.
yeah,
tool.
worked well.
That was, they were introduced, I got to think around like 95, 96, somewhere.
Maybe a little bit
Before
earlier.
that.
Earlier than
Yeah,
that?
earlier
Okay.
than that. Yeah.
It would have been,
I would say the early '90s,
yeah.
90 or 91,
Yeah.
somewhere
Okay.
in there.
All right.
Now with the training, don't you think that now, especially in this area, that we're doing too much stuff that's, I know they're not going to get hurt. You know, it's all simulated with the gas stuff and the whatever, and you go in there and you know that, well, if something happens to me, you know, they'll pull me out and it'll be, when we went through the academy, it was live burns, and you knew you only had a certain amount of time, and you didn't get out. Well, we're not sure if we can actually come in and get you. And I think that takes away a little bit of it because everybody goes in going, "Oh, this is so much fun! You just hit these targets, and it's
Yeah.
not really."
Yeah,
It does. We try to do a blend of both.
Yeah.
You know, we absolutely do it for the career departments. We bring them to our academy, and then we bring them down to a Class 8 burn building. And we also get some acquired structures to give them some experience in that, real hands-on. And if we have that ability to do that with a volunteer class, we'll do that as well. But generally, we want to make sure that they get the, especially in our county with Patterson,
Yeah.
you know, and Passaic, these guys are running, and very busy departments in urban areas, urban settings. So, you know, we try to do that with them, but, you know, we tell them in the academy, this is not the end all. This is just a taste of what's to come. You know, hopefully those departments do go out and take them to a real Class A or a, you know, real car fire
Yeah, we had, and
situation.
it's funny, ever since we've had Deputy Chief Kalman in here from Hackensack, Steve Kalman
Right.
was here, and he just blew my mind on a couple things that we discussed with his reasoning and logic. And his one thing was, he said that the fire service now is training based, not experience based, and that has stuck with me from that day that he
Yeah.
said it sitting here. That has really stuck with me in everything. Even when I'm in the fire, last night I was in the firehouse, and that stuck with me with something that occurred. And so the other thing he said was that you have an obligation as a firefighter now to seek out additional training. Because we're training based,
Sure.
you have an obligation where years ago you used to get a lot of on the job training.
Right.
Now you have to seek out that external training
Or
to better
online.
yourself. But I like to
Online
say
training,
though, yeah,
which is
without-
not,
but what I'm getting
Yeah.
at is this, right? There's opportunities out there, and we've discussed the pros and cons of FDIC and Firehouse and all these things where you can get together with some of the best instructors in the world and do this, but it's cost prohibitive, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. But what I see is there is some type of, even with the limited manpower that we have and the limited staffing and the limited amount of time that even myself have to go out and continually train under realistic conditions, I do find that guys are seeking that training out though. And
I
I
agree
do
with you.
find that
They
there
are.
seems to be some type of revitalization of like understanding the importance of the job. And people are, and the younger kids, I mean, the guys in my town, they're constantly wanting to go do some realist,
Sure.
go train, and not just you know, hoist something up to the roof and stretch a line. They want to go fire conditions. They want to be belly down. They want to learn and understand what it's like to be a cam man or control the door or you know so on. So I think that's hugely valuable to push that type of belief system in the fire service today. That it's great, you went through your basic and you went through Fire 1 and congratulations, you're now considered an interior fireman, but now you have an obligation. You have an obligation to not only yourself, but to your family and to the fire service to go better yourself even further and to push yourself further. And I think that's important. And you were hitting on that before, Tucker, just saying like it seems like it's gotten, it's not what it used to be with conditions and training, but I think there's tons of opportunity still out there.
absolutely.
And you have to, you
But
gotta
also,
go get it.
you know, the fire service in our area, we're more of rescue company, do rescue company
Well,
work.
we've morphed
Yeah.
into that. That fire prevention has gotten exceptionally bigger for the right reasons.
Sure.
So that has also decreased our real fire load, but increased the alarm, you know, capacity. But there was another one I was thinking of, and it just escaped me. But you mentioned rescue, and we're doing a lot of other ancillary services other than firefighting, and we're preparing for that boat rescue. You know, everybody's got a boat now.
Swift water.
Swift water,
Right.
high angle,
Yeah.
Right.
confined space. And, you know, with every law that's passed, you know, it puts more of a constraint on fire departments because we're called, as you know, when everything else, nobody else knows what to do, they call the fire department.
Right.
And when we show, we're expected to know what we're doing and do something. And I think to, you know, the benefit of ourselves, I think we do generally know. But it is time consuming and it is laborious, you know, if you're doing it correctly. And some departments are, some departments don't see a need. So hopefully they've, you know, partnered with another town that can come in.
Right.
And this mutual aid thing is terrific in these towns because, and even the UASI now with all the resources
Sure,
they have.
absolutely.
You know what I mean? Years ago, well, you would be embarrassed to call another town to a house fire,
Yeah.
correct? You'd
You
be
wouldn't,
embarrassed.
you wouldn't even fill your house.
No.
Every
You
all
would
your
roll the
stuff would
dice.
be
You'd
there,
roll the dice.
and your house is
You know?
just sitting there.
Yep.
The other towns would know you kind of had something, so they may be called if you had something else. But
Well,
we're
generally-
going to that fire.
Yeah, generally you called them just to keep them quiet because they were very upset that they didn't get called. I mean, recently
still are.
we recently had a house fire where we called mutual aid, the town next door. Without mentioning any names, the chief shows up and he comes over to me because I had driven the rescue truck there. So I'm standing there watching the operation. He goes over and he says, "What happened?" So what do you mean what happened? So where's the fire? I said, "Well, it's out." He said, "The fire's out." I said, "Well, isn't that what we're supposed to do when we get here?"
Right.
We put the fire out. And it's almost like if you call mutual aid, they're expecting this conflagration. You know, it shouldn't be over that soon. Because again, we train and train and train for that work. And,
Right.
you know, if you apply the right strategy and tactics, you're going to knock it real quick. Thank
Yeah.
God that's the way it's got to be
And,
done.
and you want everything to be coming, just in case
Sure.
it gets out
Oh,
of
yeah.
hand.
Well,
you
they
can always
did.
send it back.
They did, and
It's
you know,
tough to
they
get
hung
it
out.
rolling.
Yeah.
But
I love that old school Al, the old school mentality of like, we didn't call mutual aid, we handle it ourselves. Fires in my town, we handle it
well, a
ourselves.
lot of towns,
Yeah.
a lot of chiefs back then, a lot of the older chiefs had that mentality. Not that I agree with it. It was not
No, right.
necessarily
Right, but it is quite different today. But what I like too is like we did on a mutual aid level in our area was we tried to get all the partners in the mutual aid to operate similarly and use the same
Sure.
radio, designations and
Right.
and jobs and understanding, you know, first do, second do, third do truck responsibilities and things like that. Like we've tried very hard to do that, standardized alarm assignments, things like that. So, and I think you have to because as we go forward, we rely more and more on our neighbors.
Well, our
for the
mutual
help,
aid is
right?
almost like one giant fire department.
It has
That's
become
the
that.
way
It has
you
become
kinda
that
have
way,
to look
yes.
at it. And whoever is the chief that has the fire is the chief at the time, and everyone else just assists.
Yeah.
And you know, now we're backfilling other areas or skipping towns so that if we have another incident,
Right.
we're thinking beyond
Right.
that actual fire.
Yeah.
correct.
I think too, it's, you know, we talk about the aspect with the, like, calling people mutual aid and stuff and getting them rolling, and I think sometimes it's very hard because like we train the new guys that like, hey, if we have a fire, we're calling a second alarm, like, you know, or we're on so-and-so's second alarm, so if they get work, we're going, and we get there, and like, so the fire's out, we've done our job. And I almost think sometimes we build that safety catch into them to the point where like they're gonna have that time where like they show up and like it's not gonna be that easy.
Right.
Like, and that's what we're gonna say, like, now we're going to work.
Right.
And I hope, I've just never like, kind of just popped in my head with this conversation that we're having, but like I hope that that's not a disservice that we do, but at the same time, like I said, we can always send them back, we can't keep them rolling.
Yeah. I think if they know they're called for the right reason.
Yeah.
And, you know, I hate to just see people rotate the troops for the sake of rotating the troops. I mean, we have a protocol, 2 bottles, you're out, you go to rehab, you sit, you know, and then you're either approved or not approved to go back in. But just to do it, just to keep them busy because they came, I'm not really for that either because they may have something better to do than be there, but of course they come to help. But it's a fine line you got to work out. You know, you got to talk to the chiefs
But
and the
also
officers.
with these
and-
fires, you know, like you said, we don't get many jobs. So, you know, to bring in another town just so these kids can observe, oh wow, why did it burn this way? Well, if you look at it for a while, you can tell. And,
Right.
you know, in my town for a long time, we weren't going anywhere, so we weren't seeing any fires. So, you know, once we started going, and most of the time it was because we were fast team trained and we were doing that, and I said, your job is twofold, but another reason why you're here is you can see how everybody works. And your job is to kind of look at everything because we need to solve any of these little problems that might happen. So you need to keep an eye on everything. But that way you'll know how the whole fire's working the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's, if you don't see fire or you don't manage a fire, then it's controlled chaos, if best, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and God, there's so many things to say here, but I agree, and I think being Al, you brought up a great point when you said don't rotate them through just for the sake of rotating them through, and I'm thinking, you got me thinking about some of the most recent jobs that I went to, and you got your second and third alarm companies that are there, and you look at like a New York City job or a larger metropolitan city type job, they have a lot of guys, and they got a lot of guys standing in the street because they have specific tasks as what company they come in on, what alarm, they have a certain job, and if that job doesn't need to be done, but they're still there, they stand in their company, and then when called upon, they perform. And we're kind of the same way, like when we bring in all these resources in the volunteer sector on a second and third alarm, we tend to get, sometimes not quick enough people there, but when we do get them there, but there's still a tremendous amount of jobs that need to be done. And I guess this just goes into that incident command, and strategies and tactics and ground ladders and secondary, primary secondaries and all these tasks that have to be done. But it also goes to the fact that, when we don't, years ago, when you say you guys used to handle it yourselves, that meant your guys got a good solid, could be up to an hour worth of work.
Right.
And the amount of lessons learned in that 1 hour of hooking, putting fire out, cutting a roof, you name it, versus today where we might get a kid to go in on his first bottom, then they're like, all right, we're pulling the company out, we got more guys outside, take a blow.
Right.
What did the kid was
They
in there
didn't
for
get to
5-7 minutes? What did he learn? And so, you got to find that fine balance too. I was always that type of officer when I was a company officer, lieutenant, captain. There were numerous fires where they were like backing guys out, and I said, let's just shelter down in this bedroom for a minute. Mm-hmm. Let the house thin out. They got too many guys in the house. They want to back everybody out, do a par, do accountability, and so on. I would take my guys and we'd duck into a bedroom, close the door. We'd take our, go off air for a minute, take a blow. See what, and 9 out of 10 times, it wasn't because conditions were deteriorating, it was because they were losing the span of control. And so we would then police ourselves, but then we're right back in the thick of it. And I always hate being pulled out of a job before it's finished.
There was a guy up in Rhinebeck, New York, who was on the FDNY, and I didn't know it at the time, but we went into a fire, and the roof was collapsing of his house. And it was all up in the roof, and people are yelling to evacuate the building, and he just grabbed him and said, come here, and we backed down into the stairway, and he said, you know what, can't happen, it can't collapse into the stairway, it can come down, but this isn't,
right, we're good.
And then he was like, it's not falling down, everybody just take a deep breath real quick, and I was like, wow, this guy is, I don't know who he is, but he is
Mr. Khan.
I see a lot of people jump the gun, especially the younger officers, because they're trained. We're trained so much to err on the side of safety,
Right.
that we almost pull the trigger too soon, if I can use that analogy, on getting to the seat of the fire and putting it out. And again, my biggest concern on a fire scene is just that, getting water in a fire as quickly as possible. And yet when you watch a lot of these videos that are posted, there's just an inordinate amount of time from when that engine pulls up to when they stretch that line and they get that line inside or outside or anywhere to put water on the fire.
We saw
and
Bobby
that's a
Eckert.
concern.
Yeah.
That's a big concern.
Because he had this thing from Philadelphia, this crew showed up, and was it 60 seconds?
90 seconds, they had first and second floor knocked down, single inch at the quarter line, because they were an aggressive energy company, and they went in and pushed the fire out.
Absolutely.
And
that's what it's all about.
And I agree with you, and I've said that from just my experience over the years. I mean, I've been a fireman now 24 years, and you were there when I first started. And I want to touch on a couple of those quick stories, but the biggest thing is this: the problem is the fire. If we can put the fire out or subside the fire, beat it down, the problem starts to get better. Right? Well, everything else is secondary.
Yeah.
Life safety,
out,
right? If you put the fire out, you have a better chance of making life safety.
Sure.
You got a better chance of bettering the situation and so on. So, get water on the fire. That is the primary job in the fire service. And you can argue that with the truck guys all you want. At the end of the day, the nozzle's got to go in the building and put the fire out. You put the fire out, problem goes away.
Yeah, and it's I find another big issue as we transverse to the newer crowd, if you will. When they look at a building, size up, I'm not talking about what window is the flame coming out of. I'm talking about, let's talk about GPM needed for the size of the houses we're seeing in our communities today. Now,
They're hotels.
my community is a basic middle class community. A lot of capes, post World War II houses, a lot of capes, a lot of split levels, a lot of bi-levels. Nothing compared to some of these towns,
Without a
especially in Bergen County, where you have these mega mansions.
Sure.
You go into that space and you start doing your calculations, BPU,
Oh, yeah.
versus GPM. You're behind the 8 ball from the get-go.
Yep.
You're behind the 8 ball.
Without a doubt.
My biggest fire was the shopping center that burned
Yeah.
in 1997. 12 stores. It went end to end in 30 minutes.
Wow.
Low-stream truss construction, no fire protection features, nothing, not even alarm system. No firewalls, nothing.
So where is this?
Okay, Pompton Lakes.
Okay.
It was a Ben Franklin.
RSOP.
Like 5 and dime.
All right,
type
2
store.
anchor stores on the end with the strip in the middle. Typical 1950s. It was built in 56. We had just pre-planned the building in August. And when I say pre-planned, we went there, we parked the rig, shut them off, walked around that building, got up into the cock loft area, surveyed the Acme space, got up into that scuttle, looked over that selling floor, and that's what makes people go, wow, wow, yeah, wow. And you might be in here. And you shouldn't be in here if the fire's up in the truss, right? And we drove that home. There's nothing like seeing to make you believe. You can't talk about it from the outside.
Right.
You got to get into, if I can say the belly of the beast, you got to know what the inside is like. Anyway, on that particular November morning, we had a fire that started in a light fixture in the ceiling of the Acme Market. And it just progressed from there. And I'll tell you what, and I've said this, we say it in a joking manner, but if we laid out all our hose the night before, we still wouldn't have caught it. We still would not have caught it.
Yeah.
Because the airspace and the draft, talking about flow paths earlier,
Right.
the draft that fire creates. Watch any bonfire that you're out, and you can actually see, and
Oh,
you
without
know
a doubt. Yeah.
the air being pulled in. The draft itself, and we had like 9 aerial pieces. I don't know how many engines there. We were drafting out of lakes and rivers and our systems, our municipal systems. It was all for naught. The GPMs just outdid the BTUs just outdid the GPMs. And there was no way that, that was gonna happen. But again, fully unprotected building. And there was nothing in the codes that could make us upgrade. So we prepared for it, nobody got hurt. Our biggest thing is, God forbid, the order was, nobody goes in that building if that fire's in that truss, and they didn't.
Yep.
And we were there to make sure of that, and fortunately, everybody went home. We had one police officer tripped over a hose, and he was injured. That was the extent of
Was that
injuries.
from the night before? Or?
And I can't say too much about that. But anyway,
Yeah.
very successful operation when it came time to incident command. We were on 3 different radio channels. I even had people comment, how come there wasn't a lot of radio channel? Well, certain people, water supply was on their own channel, this one.
Right.
I mean, and that was really at the precursor of incident command.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't into it like we are today. It was just starting to break out and become the thing. I actually went to National Fire Academy for the weekend. And we implemented it, and it just worked great. So you got so many different segments. You got your, obviously, as you know, your incident control, command and control. Then you have your strategy and tactics, which have changed so much.
course.
And just the equipment, both the personal gear and the apparatus. You have 4 main tremendous areas where in 40 years, the technology has
without a doubt.
just gone out of sight.
Right.
You know?
Right. I will say for everybody listening and watching, of course, that was on the cover of Firehouse Magazine.
Yes, it was.
I believe in '97. I remember it. I was in college in '97, but I remember that fire specifically, and so on. I think it had a head start, right? It had a little delay.
Yeah, we have a little
reporting,
delay
and
in
then
alarm reporting.
yeah. So I mean, the cards were against you.
So
from-
we were
from the
behind the
get-go.
8 ball
Yeah.
to begin with, but it was a Monday morning at about 7:20 in the morning. So everybody had left town for work. A lot of people, I shouldn't say
Yeah.
everybody, but a lot of people were already on the way. When they heard what it was, they turned around
Yeah, oh yeah.
because we had always feared a fire in that building. We knew what the end result was going to be.
Right.
I mean, it happened in other towns. It happened in West Patterson. Years prior to that, it happened in some Bergen County towns.
Right, absolutely.
With Bowstring Trust, and of course, Hackensack,
Yep.
Yep.
The youngest, Steve, was a personal friend of mine, and, that even drove home more, of
Yeah, we've
an intense situation to the whole.
Yeah, we've discussed that at length here.
Sure.
Especially having Steve Kalman in the studio,
Yep.
Deputy Chief, and so on. And then we went down there and so on. So I mean, we got really a good lesson on that,
Right.
and so on. So,
But again, you're talking about things that we do reactively
yeah,
to help people do better and work better. And I don't disagree with the markings, the placards on the buildings,
Mhm.
but firefighters have to learn how to read buildings.
Yeah.
They have to learn how to undress them, is what I
agreed.
talk to you. They take the wood off, take the shingles off. What do you see? That's what you got to learn. Not to look for that placard, because if they do a hybrid addition after that building is built and that placard doesn't get changed, that placard to me means, as a
Nothing.
commanding officer, means nothing.
Right.
I don't even look for it.
Right.
I look at the shape of the building. A lot of parapets cover the shape. They do it, as you know, on purpose to cover the old roof style, or maybe
How do
a
you
shoddy
see
roof.
that's,
So they've got to learn to do that 360, to get those safety officers around. You mentioned that earlier, having enough safety officers. I know when I was chief, my assistant chief immediately went to the C side of the building. I was in the front, he was in the back, and we did the corner standoff like the police do for a burglary.
Right.
So I can watch two sides, he could watch two sides. If you have the manpower, it's nice to put each guy on a side, but you don't always have that. But there's just so much we can do, and unfortunately, a lot of our resources are limited now. We're not getting the turnouts we used to get. So your first job is to get water on that fire, and that
Yeah.
kind of depletes that initial response.
You hit on the construction before, and we've talked about construction here many times too, but I want to just hit on it with you real quick. In Pompton Lakes, do you see a construction boom? I mean, I know like in my area, there's a lot of new construction, which brings in the engineered lumber and all the new
Right.
types and styles of buildings.
Well-
Do you see your area?
We're seeing it right now. We've got a redevelopment commission, and we have 3 or 4 big projects
Yeah.
that are coming up.
And
And they're the typical Edgewater, New Jersey
gotcha.
fire
Right.
construction
Yep.
principles. All pre-engineered lumber. Now the steps, pre-engineered steps, you saw them. They're
Yep.
nothing but flake board and
Yep.
metal. My big concern with them, and I don't know, well, let's get back to innovations. Let's talk fire sprinklers.
Sure.
Yeah.
We've got to get a bill passed
I agree.
requiring fire sprinklers in buildings, especially residential buildings, and I'll tell you why. There's just no way to get water quicker on a fire, you know that. It gets water on a fire immediately.
Absolutely.
There's no fire company in the world that's going to be quicker than a sprinkler head. And what my suggestion is, and I'll bring that up now, and I hope, if it's being done somewhere, I'm not aware of it. But let's put a dry system in the roof lines of all these buildings. Let's put a dry system with a fire department connection on the outside. So when that fire gets into that space that we can't access, and we can't access it quickly or easily because it's in the attic space, just charge that line. I mean, everybody's going to get wet, but I don't care.
Right.
We're not going to jeopardize firefighters, civilians, residents, and we won't have to kill ourselves trying to get into that space. Because getting up on that roof is doing nothing. These exterior aerial devices pushing in are doing nothing. As a matter of fact, they're probably fanning it a little bit more and creating more of an air path. But that's what I would like to see in our town.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen
Yeah.
because obviously it's not required, but that's
You-
what we got to push for.
You have domestic water throughout town, though, right?
Yes, and we have fortunately, we have a very good system.
Yeah.
We have a municipal utilities authority, and we have good volume and good pressure
Yeah.
everywhere in town.
Yeah.
But again, when you get a fire the size of the one I talked about, with the
Sure.
strip mall, it's overtaxed.
Sure. Well, we hit on it before too. I mean, these mega mansions or McMansions, whatever you want to call them. I mean, we have some homes in my first two that are 10, 12,000 square
Sure.
feet plus, and those are commercial building fires. And the problem is that when you go into a basement of a 10,000 square foot home and there's no lolly columns in there,
Right,
and the basement's just as large as the whole first floor, and there's no center support
Exactly.
structure, what the hell does that tell you, right? I mean, and that to me scares the hell out of me. And I would love to see on the local level too, like our planning board and zoning officials put some type of ordinances in place that, residential construction over X amount of
Sure.
square footage requires some type of suppression system. I do know that there are a few homes under construction right now in some of the more affluent neighborhoods that are large square footage are actually putting in residential sprinkler systems.
Yeah.
You know what the thing that sucks about it is that like there's no reward for that. Like they'll tell you like, oh hey, you're gonna get a reduction in the taxes, or not in your taxes, in your fire insurance. It's minimal.
Yeah, but that's it. But that's if you have a fire hydrant 200 feet from your home. I'm talking about areas. A lot of these affluent communities don't have a domestic water supply system.
But I mean, even with
So-
a sprinkler system, like that's the one thing that gets like. Well, we know what the benefit.
It doesn't
is.
do anything.
Yeah, but it doesn't
Until
do. Like,
it has
there's
to
no
work.
enticement.
Oh,
That's what I was gonna.
I understand. Okay,
Yeah,
right. I
From the
understand.
insurance company.
Let me give an example in our town. They wanted to build a commercial building. It was a printing operation in our town on one of the side streets. They couldn't do it because they didn't want to pay for the water line to come down the street to service their sprinkler system that was required for this operation. The town didn't want to pay for it. The place didn't want to pay for it, so it never happened. The car wash moves in across the street. No problems. No questions asked. They supplied the car wash. Why? Because they use gallons, thousands of gallons of water a day.
Exactly.
They're selling the water. They're in the business to sell water. Sprinkler systems don't sell water. They sit there, but I don't know how the insurance companies don't require it. Mm-hmm. And I realize they just pay off on a house. It's chump change to them if the house burns to the ground. But you know what? How they get away with building these mansions with no water systems in the ground?
Yeah.
I just have no.
Yeah.
I have no clue how these towns allow it.
And I just, and
I have
then
no clue.
to bring it back to why we're here is then put us in the mix, right? You do put a fire in one of those buildings, and then we get there, and whether it's career or volunteer, you're talking about a fire with large square footage, plenty of oxygen to burn, highly
The
combustible
atrium space
materials.
is incredible in some of these.
Absolutely, but what does that do? Like, I don't, if the house goes to the foundation, it goes to the foundation. The problem is how many guys are we pushing into those houses to make
Sure.
that aggressive
Right,
attack on
and
the job?
you talked about, the large space. Well, that means there's a lot of steel and concrete in there. So
Right.
then it becomes like a commercial building where we can't even use the radio system.
Well, that or it's engineered lumber. I mean, that's the biggest
well,
problem,
that's
right? I mean,
true.
I've seen many of first floors dip into the basement, and I was on one of those floors, and thank God I made it out with 3 other guys. It's separated. It's separated from the center column, and the floor was pitching down, and the fire was rolling out from the basement, and we thought it was coming from the next room underneath that door, and we kept making a push, and then finally we come to realize that the floor is starting to sag, and the floor actually separated off the center beam of the house, and now the floor is going into the basement, and the fire's coming up from the basement. And if it wasn't for, there was a nozzle team in there with 2 of my good friends. I was the acting officer at the time on that engine company, and I was outside, followed the line back out to talk to somebody verbally. I come back in, a mutual aid chief comes in behind me on that line. We go in, something's not feeling right to me, and before it clicked in my brain, the chief behind me grabs my shoulder and goes, "We got to get out. The floor's going." And I mean, they're talking zero visibility, very high heat. These guys on the nozzle thought they were making a good push. Meanwhile, it didn't click with them that the floor was going. And at the end of that, when we were able to, we eventually got the fire out. And as everything lifted and we started looking at it, we all counted our graces and we went home that day.
There's a great video out there from Montgomery County from a helmet camera, and I can't remember which company it was. It was either like Wheaton or the other one, but I remember that you can remember the video and you'll know you're at the right one because it's around Christmas time and the one guy's got the Christmas lights
Right, on his
around
helmet.
his helmet,
Oh, yeah.
but he goes through the floor. And it happened like that, and there was not like it just didn't. It was exactly like how you're describing.
Yeah, but I'm fortunate that this went slow.
Well, it happened
And-
yesterday in Howard County,
Yeah.
Maryland.
Yeah.
They had a firefighter fall through a floor. Now that's probably engineered lumber.
And if you look at that house, right, you look at that house, I mean, that's very similar to the area that, and Tucker and I fight fires in.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
scary.
And all of that lumber, as we know, to reach flashover takes like 2 minutes. Where the houses that I responded to back in my day,
Oh, that's it.
7 or 8 minutes.
2x4s,
Sometimes we're not out of the
2x6s, half-inch
door.
sheathing.
And
In
you would
4
only
minutes.
get one flash back
You know
then,
what I mean?
which now we can have like
Exactly.
7 flashes. It's
Exactly.
just, keep building up.
So
keep
we're behind the
flashing
8
again.
ball
Yeah.
before we even get out the door.
Yeah.
Majorly behind
Yeah.
the 8 ball.
Where do you, let's kind of take it a different way, Al, real quick. I mean, you've been doing this a long time and you've always been very, very much involved. Whether it was chief, I think you were chief for 12 years of your department, right? And then as the lead instructor or the director of the academy. But like the fire service in general, I mean, we talk about all these different things, and we talked a lot of firematics tonight, which was great because we don't do a lot of that here. We talk more about the culture and tradition. So I really been enjoying this, but I'm just curious, like going forward, I don't know, do you have any thoughts about like how do we entice or how do we look to grow the volunteer ranks, if you will, right? I mean, we have a lot of career guys that follow and so on, but you know, we're all very heavily involved in the volunteer service, and you are still, with all your years in this, you're still very much involved in your company. I know you are, and very involved in the fire service. So, like, do you have any ideas or thoughts, or are you seeing anything?
I have ideas, but they're not new ideas.
Yeah.
They're old ideas.
That's okay.
And this is what I've seen happen. When I joined, and even before me, I had my parents, my father was never involved, but I had uncles that were in the fire department. The fire department back then was the center of the community.
It was a family.
It was a family. When they came together, it was for a picnic or it was for a party. It was a social piece of the community,
Sure.
just like your church was.
Sure.
You know, you had your church group, you had your fire department group. Look at the parades we used to have. You can't even get a parade today.
Right.
You can't even have one. Nobody wants to come.
You're right.
Nobody wants to polish a fire engine for 3 weeks, you know, to get a trophy this big and put it on a wall. And I get that. I know I never did. But the bottom line is we've gotten away from that.
Yeah.
Our young guys come in the door, they answer the alarm, they come back, and they go out. They don't hang around. We used to sit on the back step. We used to talk
Oh yeah.
about, you know, some stories, share fires that we went to, or what did you think about this? Even a mini critique, unofficially. You know, what do you think happened today? You know, did we do the right thing? We've lost that. I think the cell phone had a tremendous impact because to talk to somebody in a firehouse, you had to come to the firehouse.
Right.
Now
Yeah,
you just
you're
get
right.
on your phone and you're texting them where they could be in California. I really think, and not just fire departments, the cell phones had a tremendous impact on our social
Agreed.
networking
Agreed.
across the board. And I think that had a big effect on us. A lot of young guys don't have the time. They want to, they get in. We lost a lot of guys right after they got out of the academy. You know, they came around for maybe a year and all of a sudden they disappeared. Well, I got a new job, or I got married, I can't afford to live in town, or I got to work a second job, I got to borrow a house. We didn't have that problem. You know, we didn't have, when I got home from work, I had free time to go up to the firehouse
Right.
and wash the truck or
Yep.
rack the hose or
And
whatever.
even that aspect of I can't afford to live in town anymore.
Right.
I think that's one where like truly, I've watched it in Poughkeepsie. I've watched it down in Maryland. And I've watched it, you know, being here, like talking with Jeremy from Franklin Lakes, or even you down in Hocus. Like people, like the people that are living here, they're not volunteering.
No,
And
and they won't.
And
And it's not just the fire service. It's
right.
baseball
Exactly.
coaches,
Yeah,
library
and
boards.
that's
it's-
not because like that's just because like they're coming from an area where that part of community service was never a thing. Like,
No.
and they're not even thinking about the community. Is it
Right.
safe? Are there services?
Are the
Can I
schools
build my
good?
8,000 square
Right.
foot home? Great.
You would be surprised at the numbers of people that think we have paid fire service.
Oh, without
Oh,
doubt.
yeah.
They
without
have
doubt.
no clue, especially if they moved in from the city.
Yep.
They just accept the fact.
And Rob hit it. I mean, you know, that's a big thing where people come from urban settings. You know, we like where we are in Bergen County. It's a bedroom community for New York City, and so a lot of the people that live in our communities commute to the city every day. And so volunteering in their community probably goes as far as like maybe a baseball or soccer coach on the recreation. That's about it.
Or like
But-
dropping pennies into the can of the
Yeah,
grocery store.
right. Yeah, but the thing is too is that they have a level of expectation of services because that's all they've ever known. You know, whereas a guy like me grew up in a small town, and I understand the value of small town and a small police department, a volunteer fire department. You knew every cop by name, which is even well, that's changing now too. But you know, that's part of it. I think, just real quick too, just thinking back, like you said, like a lot of guys, and I see it too. Guys after the run come back. I mean, you know, volunteer house. If you still can crack a beer, you used to crack a beer. You used to tell a story. You used to have that camaraderie. What I find now, though, and I've done a couple little segments on this on our platform, is about the senior man and just talking about, like, is the senior man even putting in the amount of time that he should be putting in? Because what I find, and I know I'm guilty of it, there's a lot of times that I go to a call, I sign in, after the call, I go on the call, come back, I sign in, I'm like, all right, guys, I got to run. I got something going on, I'm doing this, right? But I do find that there are times when I can stay. I like to engage guys, and I do find that when the senior guys are willing to stick around also, the younger guys tend to stick around to hear the stories.
Yep.
Or to just kind of like get that camaraderie, because I think they miss that. Like, you know, I look at like my two older guys. I mean, Michael's 24 and Kendra's 21, and you know, I look at them, and a lot of them hanging out with their friends is them on their phones too, like you said, right? Yeah. But I do find in the firehouse, like we had a couple runs. We had 3 runs after midnight tonight, today. So I made 2 out of the 3. And I found at 2 o'clock this morning, we got back, and a couple young kids, me and one other older guy, and it was kind of awake still, so we started talking. And then, like, they all stayed, because there's engagement, right? I think it's important that we still, even a guy like yourself with all these years in the service, still try to engage the younger.
I would say a lot of our guys do.
That's good.
Try to engage. But I'll give you an example of something that struck me. And this happened a couple of years ago. We had a young man. We had a fire around 4:30 in the morning. And when we got back, I would have gone home, taken a shower, and gone to work.
Right.
You know, and there were many days that I did that. But we have guys that don't show up.
Right.
If it's between a certain time period, they don't show up because they have to get up and go to work. Well, I had to go up and go to work as well.
I get it.
But I took it, and went to work. And of course, you're tired throughout the day, but you make it up the following night. I don't see that. What's the word I'm looking for? The loyalty, maybe it is. I don't see that loyalty and commitment on the part. I won't lump everybody in a group.
I get it.
But there are a lot that don't put that loyalty there. I mean, it got in my blood. I know it got in your blood. I knew that. And you want to be there.
Yeah.
You want to help. There's no greater satisfaction, at least for me, knowing that we saved somebody or saved somebody's house. It was just a feeling of exhilaration. And I always tease the guys in my department, because I say, we should put signs up in front of the homes we save. We don't do that. The only thing you see in our town is where the building's burnt down.
Yeah.
We have a space on the main street. What was there? Well, that was a building that burnt down. But we had a fire in that building. We did, yes.
Yeah.
Should put a sign out front. We had a building, but we saved it. We don't do that. Of course, we're not going to do that. But if they only knew the saves that we make in the incipient stage, or even in a...
For our department up in New York, like, where I work, we have a high tax base. Like, we're one of the highest tax districts. You get the career staff, so people are like,
right.
They're aggravated. But at the same time, like, in our reporting, we're able to say that, hey, we protected this many millions of dollars of equipment. Like, we went to these are the calls that we went there, and if nobody showed up, this would have gone into a fire. And it would have, like, this building's rated at $450,000, and it would have been in the ground, And I think that's like a good avenue to go, because you gotta have that tracking. And I think the kids can help us out with the technology, because I know.
A couple weeks ago, I was pissed off. I slept through a car fire.
Did you?
I never sleep through cars, right? Yeah. I actually slept
through it. They don't
happen
too often.
No, right. You don't, like, even a car fire. 24 years in, I'll still take car fire 24 hours a day, right? Slept through it. And I don't sleep through calls that much. And I actually slept through this, and I wake up the next morning, 5:30, my alarm goes off. I pick up my phone just to make sure I didn't miss anything throughout the night, like messages-wise, whatever. And I look, and it's all lit up, and I go, what the hell is this? And I go, fire. I click on it, right? And the car turned out to be an arson car fire on 287, right? Okay. Pull the car over in the grass, they landed on fire, and a cop pulls. The cop happened to be patrolling, pulls up, right? And then they jump in the car and they take off. Left the gas can burning next to the car, like total, like, blatantly obvious, And then the guy's like, oh yeah, we missed you last night. I'm like, 24 years in, I was pissed. I was still pissed. Like, I do, but like you said, like, I have that civic pride, and I have that, I love to put the sign in the front yard to tell everybody the value that we bring and what we do, and so on. But I also do it because I get a personal satisfaction out of it. And not a lot of people talk about that. Right, everybody talks about doing it for your community. You do it for the betterment of
God, country.
Listen, I do it because I love getting my ass kicked. I love working hard, but I love working with a team, and I love the brotherhood, and I love being able to come back from a job and re-rack the engine and have that camaraderie. And that that camaraderie, like everybody says, right? You get a job, you come back to the firehouse. You know what? Things are good for 90 days,
Yep.
man. 3 months
Yeah.
after that fire,
Right, you're
things
good.
seem to level off.
Yeah.
There's no bitching. There's no griping.
No, it
so I mean,
definitely changes the mood,
it sure does.
without a doubt.
Sure does.
But you know, I mentioned something too. We have a very small, tight-knit town,
right.
okay? And that helps because our powers that be, you know, our mayor and council and, you know, our other groups that we support, they know who we are and they know we're there to support them.
Well, that's good.
You don't get that in the bigger towns.
Yeah.
You know, especially people that it's
It's
a
a fight
bedroom,
for
use it as a
budget
bedroom
money, too.
community. Because they're out of the town all day.
That's right.
They don't see a lot of interaction, a lot of what goes on. And they come home to sleep and maybe, you know, have their barbecues or whatever. But, so I think depending on the community too, you know, it has an effect overall. Because we feel the thanks, you know, we get it from the mayor and council. And obviously it shows too in their support of us and the equipment, you know, that we get and so forth. So you know that they're on your side. And that also helps with
That's
the morale issue and
Absolutely.
and everything else that goes along with it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. Well, I will say, no, this has been fantastic, and I'm not wrapping up yet by any means, but I just wanted to touch on a couple other things. Al was a, you know, other than all his other titles, he was a high school teacher for many, many years, and I had the privilege of being one of his students, and he was one of my favorite teachers of all kind. But I'll tell you this about Al. Al was great. He worked in the shop wing for many years, and then became vice principal and then principal. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So I alluded to it earlier that the only Saturday detention I ever got, Al put me in you know, I got caught having a cigarette outside of school. You weren't allowed to smoke on property. This is when I was like 16, 17 years old. I go in. Al was acting vice president or vice principal at the time. I go in his office. Now I know him because of the fire service. My family's been in the fire service. So, and Al was always, the one thing I can always say about Al was he always spoke so highly of the fire service. And you were proud to be a fireman. You were proud
Absolutely.
of the Pompton Lakes Fire Department, and everybody knew how proud you were of that. And so I was like, oh, this is great. Go in and see Al. This is great, man. Brotherhood, right? Brotherhood. I walk in his office, right? Sit down. He goes, what'd you do? I was like, they, you know, caught me having a cigarette. He goes, you know, you're not allowed to smoke at school, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, all right, Saturday. And I go, what? He goes, just Saturday detention. And I go, well, Al,
Come on,
right?
let's
I'm
work,
like,
man.
Mr. Evangelista, like, you know, and he's like, did you break the rules? I'm like, well, yeah, Saturday detention. And that was one of those, like, moments I'm like, whoa, right? But I love, like, looking back on it, it's a fantastic story. But the one story I really want to hit on is I was in school, I was a senior, pager goes off in school, and it was for a reported fire, right? Now, we didn't have an open campus, so we weren't allowed to leave high school to go to fires, right? So because I hung out in what we call the 900 wing, which was like the shop wing, auto shop, drafting, wood shop, metal shop, which I don't think any of that exists anymore in high school, right?
Pretty much gone.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I hung out in that wing quite often. And so I was able to park in the upper parking lot. So I'd cut out of class to go use the bathroom. I'd go out into the parking lot and I'd sit in the truck and listen to the scanner to see if it's a job, right? And see, like, is it worth, like, playing hooky and, like, leaving, so on, right? You're not supposed to. Al comes by in a Chiefs car. He pulls up and he sees me sitting in the truck. He goes, what are you doing? Why aren't you in class? And I was like, oh, we got a reported fire. He goes, if it's a job, I'll take you myself. And I was like, what? Right? I go, what? He goes, I'll take you myself if it's a fire. So he's like, let me know. So he's like parking the car, and then he sees me, he comes back, he's like, what? I'm paraphrasing, and he goes, well, and I go, it's a kitchen fire. And he goes, is it going? And I'm like, no, it sounds like it's not. He's like, get your ass back to class. But I'll tell you this, like growing up in high school where, you know, I played sports and being a volunteer fireman was not the popular thing to do, or it wasn't, you know, there were only a handful of other kids that had any desire to do any of that type of stuff, and I was very proud of it. And I think a lot of that had to do with the way that Al carried himself, and I thank you for that, because
Thank you very much.
and I think there's a couple other guys that were in my group when we came through with you being who
Yes.
you were in school, and we're all still very much involved in the fire service.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of it had to do with your tutelage. And
Thank you.
You spoke very highly of the job, and so I thank you.
You're
and
welcome.
for you to be here
You're
tonight
welcome.
is really important to me. So
Well,
I'm glad to have you.
I could tell you a number of success stories with
Awesome.
students that went through there that either went volunteer or career,
Yeah.
both in EMS and in fire. And one of my greatest days, if you can, of thanks, was we had a student that joined Volunteer Department, and then he went on to become a career firefighter and retired after, 25, 30 years. At his retirement party, which I was at, he said, I have one man to thank for finishing my career the way I did, because he got me into it. He pointed over to me.
That's cool.
And I was, I think, the only volunteer in the crowd. I think everybody else there was career. And boy, that made me feel like $100. But you know what it was? I always wanted to inspire young people for community service. Now, we know it really never was a big deal until 9/11. After 9/11, then it all became, do for your community. The CERT teams, community emergency response teams came into play. But I always respected those kids that wanted to serve their communities, because they weren't doing it for personal gain. They weren't, they weren't in charge of a yearbook because they wanted to put that on their resume, or they wanted to, speak at graduation, or whatever the case may be. They were doing it because they really liked it and or wanted to help their communities, and that's a beautiful thing. We should encourage more of that. I know we do. We do as much as we can, but even in the case of my own son, growing up from a little boy, wanted to be a fireman, and today he is one, as they say. Today
that's
he is
fantastic.
a career fireman. So it's just a nice thing to see people grow into their positions, find themselves. Some of these kids that found themselves were not the greatest kids, in school as far as paying attention to the rules. But
He just looked at you.
Oh, I thought that went right through me.
that's what's growing up. A lot of people forget that there's a tremendous maturation process that occurs at that age.
Yeah.
Kids have all kinds of things tearing at them, and trying to find themselves in what their careers are going to be. And we're in a very high pressure area of the country as far as people going to college, and not just college, but Ivy Leagues or high-end colleges and so forth. So that puts a lot of pressure on young people today.
Yeah. Well, I thank you, and thank you for your story.
You're welcome.
We've been going for quite a while here, and I'm sure we could go for hours more, but I thank you. I thank you for being here tonight. It means a lot to me.
It's been a pleasure.
This platform means a lot to all of us, and especially me.
Very cool. You're good to have a mentor.
Yeah.
On, because that's
Yeah.
I didn't really hit on the mentorship thing, and that's okay, because actually it's good to end it on that, because it's for me, having pretty much, it was like I hold my beer, I'm going to call Rob with this idea of National Fire Radio, but and that's one of the things we say at a lot of podcasts is how we got this started.
Yeah.
Is he called me up because he knew me, but he didn't know me.
Oh, yeah.
But now it's neat because I get to see one of his mentors,
Yeah.
one of the people who was involved in shaping him to, pretty much come up with this harebrained idea and be like, hey, let's do this. And everything else.
That's good to hear.
It's awesome.
It's
Thank
fun.
you.
We're having a lot of fun with it, and I thank you.
You guys
So,
didn't tell me you needed hair for this.
That's all right.
Dude,
Thank you.
Pleasure.
As these guys talk about their hair care, thank you. So, guys, Al Evangelista, home run of a brother, and really just a good friend and mentor. So I thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah.
Guys, Jeremy, National Fire Radio, which is now Rob's cell phone ringer, which is one of my favorite things in the world.
Yes. Awesome cell phone ring. We're going to put it up on iTunes soon.
For sale.
Yeah.
And for Tucker and Sebi behind the scene, who never gets enough credit.
Absolutely.
I thank all of you for listening and watching, and we have a lot coming out over the next few weeks. And thank you. Thanks for really supporting us and checking out our content. Things have been going really well, and we appreciate all the support. So take care, be safe, be in touch. Awesome. Al, thank you. That was fantastic.
Hey everybody, it's Rob Ridley from National Fire Radio. Thanks for tuning in. Catch up with us on social media. We got
SoundCloud, National Fire Radio, YouTube, National Fire Radio, Instagram, National Fire Radio, and
not least,
Facebook, National Fire Radio. Guys, check us out. Take care. Be safe.
See you later.